Thank you for downloading our Florida Product Approval webinar, where we intend to discuss important aspects of the Florida Building Code and how to ensure your products are in compliance and ready for market. Our expert is Emma Amirali, and I'm going to hand it over to her for the start of the presentation.
Thanks, Mallory. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Emma Amirali, and I will be discussing the Florida product approval process during today's webinar. A little bit of background about me. I graduated from the University of British Columbia in 2011 with a Bachelor in Integrated Engineering. I joined the Intertek Evaluation Services team in July of 2012. So I've been with the company for about 5 years now. I work on various projects involving roofing, insulation, siding, and coatings, but my main focus is roofing. I'm currently a member of ASTM D8, National Women in Roofing, and a few other local associations here in BC, such as BC BEC. Here's the overview for today's webinar. I will first provide a brief introduction on the Florida Building Code. We will then discuss the product approval process in details, followed by the product application validation process. From there, we will wrap up with a summary and then FAQ period. So the Florida Building Code is based on the International Building Code with amendments and supplements to address concerns that are specific to Florida. The current edition we use is the 5th edition, which is the 2014 version. Florida has 2 regions that require windborne debris protection. The first one is the high velocity hurricane zone, which covers the Miami-Dade and Broward counties. And then the second one is the windborne debris region. This is considered as regions within 1 mile of the coastal mean high water line, where the ultimate design wind speed is 130 miles per hour or greater, or areas where the ultimate design wind speed is 140 miles per hour or greater. It should be noted that all hospitals and nursery homes in Florida are designed as if they were in the windborne debris region. Here is the map of the windborne debris region. We won't be discussing the details of the risk category or the ultimate design wind speed for these regions during today's webinar, but they can all be found in Chapter 16 of the Florida Building Code. So a common question I get asked is, what is the difference between Florida and Miami-Dade approval? So Miami-Dade approval is actually considered a local approval. However, since it meets the requirements of the high velocity hurricane zone, then it can be used for state approval as well. The approvals without high velocity hurricane zone recognition can be used essentially anywhere in the state except for Miami-Dade and Broward counties. Approvals with high velocity hurricane zone recognition are statewide. We won't be discussing Miami-Dade approval during today's webinar. However, Intertek will be hosting a separate webinar to go over this topic. Here we have a list of products that have additional or different requirements than the IBC, the International Building Code. I won't read them all out loud, but as you can see, they're all building enclosure or structural components that are affected by Florida's windstorms. The Florida Building Code and the test protocols for the high velocity hurricane zone. So those are your TAS protocols. They should all be reviewed to determine the performance requirements for these products. A copy of the code and the task protocols can all be found on the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation website. I've taken a screenshot of the homepage here, and basically all information related to the Florida product approval can be found on the site. This includes product approval application, proposed code modifications, and some training materials. The next slide I have here is just a close-up of the right-hand side of that site we showed previously. And this is just to show where you can find the code and product approval applications. So now we can go into the details of the product approval process. I will start with the new application, and then we will cover application revision process. Ultimately, for new applications, there are 5 different ways of applying. We have the certification method, test report method, evaluation report from an evaluation entity, and evaluation report from a licensed architect or professional engineer. We also have method 2, which is products which have no standardized tests, comparative tests, or rational analysis. During today's webinar, we will be discussing method 1 only. So certification method, which is method 1A, is what most people are familiar with. This is the certification mark or listing report that is issued by an approved agency. And this really just indicates that the product is in compliance with the code. One thing to note when you are using this method is that you need to list the standards that the product is in compliance with on the application, and that the addition of those standards need to be consistent with what is referenced on your listing report. In the case that they're not, you will need to have your either certification agency or your validation agency write you an equivalency letter just to state that the 2 editions of the standards are equivalent. And this equivalency letter gets uploaded onto your application. So Intertek is an approved certification agency, so this means that all of our listing reports can be used for Florida approval. We then have the test report method, which is method 1B. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's a test report from an approved testing lab that, again, indicates that the product is in compliance with the code. I have provided a link here so you could view the current status of each Intertek lab. So Intertek is not approved as one entity, but each location individually. So it would be useful to utilize this link just to view the current status of each lab. I have made a note here that the product testing lab is not allowed to validate the application. We will be discussing the validation process in details a little later on in the webinar, but I just want to include a note here on the test report method slide. Then we have evaluation report from an evaluation entity. This is method 1C. This is an evaluation report that indicates that a product is in compliance with the code. It could be based on standard tests, standard comparative, or rational analysis. So this method can be used for products that are currently covered in the code, in the Florida Building Code, or alternative products that have an acceptance criteria. Good example of this is a synthetic underlayment. Intertek is an approved evaluation report, meaning that our code compliance research reports, our CCRRs, are accepted for Florida. We just need to make sure that we add the FBC supplement if you are looking for the high velocity hurricane zone. So method 1D, the evaluation report from a licensed architect or professional engineer, is pretty similar as the previous method, except that rather than the evaluation report being issued by a nationally recognized entity, it is issued by individual licensed architect or professional engineer. So Intertek can provide you with this report as well. So now we move into application revision. So this either falls under editorial revision or full revision. Editorial revision is used when minor corrections are made to the application, or essentially any change that does not require new technical information or supporting documents. Good example of this is if you're changing your quality assurance entity. The editorially revised applications do require validation. Full revision is when submission of new technical data is required. A good example of this is if you are adding a new product to your application, or if you are removing or adding some limitations to your application. And this also requires the application to be validated as well. Then we have self-affirmation. This can be used when there are either no changes made to the code, or if the changes made to the code does not affect the performance of a product. So what happens is that the original evaluation entity can prepare a letter report to confirm and verify that the product still complies with the subsequent code version. That letter is then uploaded onto your application. This method does not require validation. So those are all the different methods that you can use when applying for Florida approval. Once your application has been completed, then it goes under a validation process. So the product application validation can either be an admin validation or a technical validation. And as I mentioned before, I just want to reiterate that all applications except for self-affirmation applications do require validation. So even if you are making a correction to an application, which is considered an editorial change, you will still need to have the application validated. Admin validation is required for methods 1A and 1C. So that is the certification and the evaluation report from an evaluation entity methods. This is when you verify all supporting documents, the limits that are set within the scope of certification, and you review the installation instructions. I am currently Intertek's validator, admin validator, which means that when you select Intertek as your validation agency, I get the notification and I go ahead and do my review. Here's the checklist that we use for admin validation. This one specifically is for the certification method. I won't read all of these out loud, but essentially what we're doing is we are verifying that all of the products that are referenced on the application are also on your certification report, on your listing report, and that the limitations that are used on the application are in accordance with your certification documents as well. So this is just a continuous of the checklist. When we finish with the admin validation, then the application goes to the Department of Business, Professional and Regulation, their review, and they essentially approve the application. Technical validation is required for method 1B. That's the test report method. And this is when the engineer verifies that evaluation complies with the code. So who are technical validators? Best way to determine that is to view the current list of approved product validation agencies. I have added a note here that method 1D, which is the evaluation report from a licensed architect or professional engineer, would also require a technical validation only if the evaluation report is not prepared by an independent third party. So if a manufacturer has their own professional engineer, licensed engineer, or architect, and they prepare an evaluation report, then that report will also need to go through a technical validation. Technically validated applications are also then reviewed and approved by the DBPR. So I just wanted to include this slide at this point to conclude essentially that Intertek is an approved product certification agency. We are an approved evaluation entity. We're also approved to be a testing lab and validation entity. Florida approved products do require a quality assurance program, and so Intertek is an approved quality assurance entity as well. So I've taken a few screenshots of the Florida site just to get you a bit more familiar. Here's a screenshot of the user registration page. This is what you need to fill out when you first create your application. And it just includes basic contact information about your company. And then we have a screenshot of the product approval page, and this is where you can navigate approved organizations or products. You can also submit an organization application here as well if you're an approved lab, quality assurance, or certification agency. So this is a screenshot of the directory. As you can see, you can use a lot of criteria to look up a product. You don't necessarily need to have the Florida application number. So you could search by the category or subcategory or the manufacturer. One thing to watch out for here is that if you get an error message, it could be because the application or the product that you're looking for is not up to date, and that you need to change the code version from 2014 to a previous one. So it would be 2010. I have taken a screenshot of an existing application as an example. So the company name and the contact information and the product name have all been cut out. But I just want to show you this to show where the category and the subcategory are stated, and that where the compliance method and all other information regarding the validating agency and certification agencies are shown. So this is a continuous of the application. I couldn't fit it all onto one page, but this is where the standards that your product complies with are referenced. So the edition or the year of the standards on your application need to be consistent with the code version that you have selected. So if you have selected 2014 Florida Building Code, please refer to Chapter 35 of the code to review the edition of the standard. And if those additions are different than what is stated on your certification document, then that is when you need that equivalency letter that I was discussing earlier on. So then here on the left-hand side of the table is where you have all limits applicable to the product. This is where you state if the product is for use in the high-velocity hurricane zone, and this is where you reference the design pressure and impact resistance of the product as well. On the right-hand side is essentially where you upload all of your supporting documents. So your install instructions, your evaluation report, or test report. Again, it all depends on what method of compliance you have selected. I wanted to show this screenshot of the upcoming product approval meetings, but I have also provided a link below that show all of 2017, and I believe they have 2018's meeting agenda as well. So please use that link to view the schedule. So as I mentioned earlier, all products that are covered under Florida approval require a quality assurance program, and they need to be inspected on an annual basis at minimum. So Intertek has recently updated its directory of building products, and we now show quality assurance clients on our directory. This information was previously private information and it didn't appear in our directory, but now we show this. So this means that if your product is under our quality assurance program, then anyone can select your company name, view the product, view the Florida application number associated with it. So there are no special label requirements when it comes to Florida approval, but you still need to meet the code requirements. So whatever that is mandated by the code will still need to be met. You can use, if Intertek is your quality assurance entity, then you can use that Intertek mark on your product along with the Florida application number. So that brings us to our summary. To conclude, there are 4 methods of applying for Florida approval. You could either have your new application, it could be an editorially revised application, a full revision, or self-affirmation. For a new application itself, there are 5 different methods of compliance, and Intertek is approved to assist you or to be involved at any step of the approval process that you need. So meaning that we are approved certification agency, so you could use us for method 1A. We are an approved testing lab, so you could use us for method 1B. We are an approved evaluation entity, so our code reports, our CCRRs can be used, and that is method 1C, and we have individual licensed engineers who can also write the evaluation report for method 1D. And the Intertek label or our name essentially can be used on your product if we conduct a follow-up inspection for you and your product is under our quality assurance program. I have included some helpful links here for hot topics the meeting agenda, and I have also included the FBC staff contacts. Most of the people there are pretty responsive and are very helpful, so I suggest that if at any point you're stuck with your application or you're not really sure what you're doing, please reach out to them. They are very helpful. So I have included some of the frequently asked questions regarding the Florida approval process. These are very common questions that I get asked, so I just want to share them. The first one is, do I automatically qualify for Miami-Dade approval with my Florida product approval? And the answer is you can if you are qualified for use in the high-velocity hurricane zone. So as I mentioned earlier, Miami-Dade is a local approval, but because it meets the requirements of the high-velocity hurricane zone, then it can be used for state approval as well. Can one application be filled out for multiple products? I would say yes, if the products are similar enough and that the method of compliance is the same for the various products. So the Florida site doesn't allow you to select more than one compliance method on an application. So you need to ensure that the method of compliance is the same for all products if you are planning on using only one application. How do I know the best method of compliance for Florida? So it depends on the product that you are trying to qualify. So is your product currently covered in the code? Does your product have an approved acceptance criteria, ICCS acceptance criteria? It's a really good idea to have a discussion with your testing or certification agency to ensure that you have the correct method of compliance selected and that the final deliverable you're getting will get you into the regions that you need recognition for. Can I use my CCRR without the FBC supplement for Florida approval? Yes, you can if it's for recognition outside of the high velocity hurricane zone. For recognition in high velocity hurricane zone, you will need the FBC supplement on your code report, and it will need to specifically address the high velocity hurricane zone requirements and sections of the code. Does Intertek have an expiration date for the quality assurance service? No. So we continue to conduct the follow-up inspections for you as long as you require it. Our online directory would be a good place to check the current status of a product's quality assurance status. If it's not there, then reach out to us to inquire about this. Again, we have only recently started this public quality assurance program on our directory, so not all of our clients have been transferred to the online section, so it's best to confirm the status with us. So this wraps up today's webinar. Thanks again for joining. Here's my contact information. Please do reach out to me if you have any questions or you require any assistance with your Florida application. Thank you again.